and this is our new CEO.
Joy Adkins became a CEO at 31. It happened quietly, the way most of her achievements did not announce dramatically, just arrived at through a relentless accumulation of better decisions than everyone around her. The company was mid-sized, tech-adjacent, the kind that matters in rooms that other people aren't invited into yet. She took the role on a Monday morning, told Christopher over the phone, and went back to her desk by noon. She did not tell Rosalind. When Bill mentioned it at dinner that Sunday, proud in the cautious way of a father who senses there is something between his daughter and his wife that he has never fully been able to see, Rosalind said all the right things. So impressive. She's worked so hard. Martha would be so proud. Martha's name in Rosalind's mouth. Joy smiled, said thank you. Pass the bread. 4 months after she became CEO, Joy met John. John Osei was a CEO in his own right, logistics and infrastructure. The kind of company that moves things around the world quietly so that other people's things can arrive on time. He was serious-faced in public and entirely different in private, sharp-witted. Kind in a way that didn't perform itself, with hands that gestured when he was excited about something and a laugh that arrived suddenly and filled a room before he'd finished deciding to laugh. He met Joy at an industry conference. He introduced himself. She assessed him in approximately 4 seconds and said, "Your Q3 shipping report had an error in the projected Southeast Asia numbers." She had read it 3 weeks earlier for adjacent research. She retained things. He stared at her, then he laughed that sudden room-filling laugh. "You're going to be a problem," he said. Consistently, she said. They were married 13 months later. She brought John home to meet the family. She needed to watch Rosalind interact with her husband. She needed to see who Rosalind was now that the stakes were higher. Rosalind charmed John effortlessly. That was the word, effortlessly. She touched his arm when she laughed, asked questions about his work that demonstrated she'd done research, was warm and maternal and welcoming in a way that Joy observed with the focus of a scientist. "She's still good at it," Joy noted. 20 years later and she's still exactly that good. Jon pulled her aside in the kitchen afterward and said, "Your stepmother's intense." "In what way?" Joy said. Like he paused, searching for it. Like someone performing a play. Everyone else is just living in the house, but she's performing in the house. Does that make sense? Joy looked at her husband, this man she'd chosen with her whole careful heart. "It makes perfect sense," she said. And then she told him everything. Christopher, meanwhile, had become a pilot. It had not been easy, no. There had been years of working toward it, of funding it himself with Joy's help, quiet and consistent, of Rosalind's occasional poison deployed, not as outright opposition, but as the kind of subtle doubt that's hard to fight, because it never quite says what it means. Such a competitive field. I just worry about the financial stability. Your father thinks it might be worth considering other options. Christopher had flown his first commercial route at 26, a regional carrier, and he'd called Joy from the cockpit on layover, technically against procedure, flagrantly, and said, "I just flew 42 people from, didn't kill a single one of them." "Bare minimum standard," Joy said. "I know," he said. It was amazing. She'd sat down after that call and cried, finally, for about 2 minutes, just the release of all those years of calling him every day, of making sure there was someone in his corner who told him, "Yes, you are. Yes, you can. Yes, you will," and then she'd washed her face and gone back to work. Ariel, by contrast, was 26 and had failed at 3 ventures, had a complicated relationship history that Rosalind discussed with sighing concern, and was currently exploring her options while living in Bill's house on Bill's money. She had grown from a calculating child into a loud, entitled adult who took everything as her due and had never once looked at Christopher's trajectory or Joy's and thought, "Perhaps I should try harder." She had never needed to. Someone had always been there to cushion the fall. Cushioning was all Rosalind had ever done for Ariel, and armor was all Rosalind had ever not done for Bill's children. The legal process moved quietly. Joy's attorney, a woman named Mary Brisk, and precise as a scalpel, who Joy had chosen specifically for her background in medico-legal cases, had spent 8 months organizing what Joe Mensa had found into something actionable. Kim Webb had given a formal statement. The financial records had been subpoenaed. The nursing board's archived complaint had been resurfaced. It wasn't, Mary explained carefully, going to be a simple case. The medical evidence was circumstantial, damaging, but circumstantial. The strongest pieces were Kim's testimony, the letter, and the financial trail. Together they built a picture. Whether that picture added up to a prosecutable charge or a civil finding or simply an exposure that would undo Rosalind's life was something that remained to be seen. "What do you want from this?" Mary asked Joy, direct as always. Joy thought about it for a long time. "I want my father to know the truth," she said. "I want the people who need to investigate to have what they need. I want her to not be able to pretend anymore. The rest, whatever the law does with it, I'll accept." Mary nodded. "All right, then we tell your father first, before anything is filed." The hardest day of Joy's adult life was not becoming CEO. It was not planning a wedding. It was not any of the negotiations or confrontations or sleepless nights that had built the woman she was. It was a Sunday afternoon in her father's living room with Christopher beside her and John waiting in the car outside, sitting across from a 62-year-old man with a repaired heart and tired eyes who had loved the wrong woman and paid for it for 25 years without knowing the price he'd paid. Rosalind was out. Joy had engineered this, had called Rosalind that morning and mentioned that John was having trouble finding a gift for a friend, that Rosalind had such great taste. "Would you mind helping him pick something up this afternoon?" And John had driven Rosalind to a mall 40 minutes away while Joy and Christopher sat down with their father. She told him everything. She started at the beginning, Rosalind and Bill, in college. The breakup, Rosalind and Martha's friendship, the nursing career, Martha's symptoms and the timeline, Kim Webb, the medication logs. The letter Bill didn't speak. He sat across from his children and he didn't speak for a very long time. His face went through things that Joy couldn't entirely track. Shock first, then the particular horror of retroactive understanding, then something else, something she hadn't anticipated. Grief, new, fresh grief for Martha. Like losing her again, now knowing. He put his hands over his face. His shoulders moved. Joy looked at Christopher. Christopher looked at Joy. Then, without discussion, they both moved to their father, Joy on his left, Christopher on his right, and they sat with him. The way he'd sat with them at their mother's funeral. The way he'd done the best he could in the rubble of his own grief. They sat there for a long time. "I should have seen it," Bill said finally. "Broken open. She was designed for you not to," Joy said plainly. Without softening it, because he didn't need softening, he needed truth. Finally, after 25 years, she spent years learning exactly how to be what you needed before she made her move. This isn't about you failing to see. This is about someone who built their entire life around not being seen. Bill looked at his daughter. In her face, he saw Martha, the jawline, the directness, the absolute refusal to sugarcoat anything that needed to be said. He saw Christopher's steadiness. He saw something else too, something that was entirely Joy's own, the specific hard-won strength of someone who had been left to raise herself and had done it brilliantly without letting it make her cruel. He reached out and took Joy's hand with one hand and Christopher's with the other. "Your mother," he said, and then he couldn't finish it. "We know," Christopher said. "We know, Dad," Joy said. Jon returned home with Rosalind at 6:15. She came through the door with shopping bags and a story about a difficult sales assistant that was halfway out of her mouth when she saw the three of them standing in the living room. Joy and Christopher side by side, Bill between them, all three facing the door. And she saw it in their faces. She was perceptive enough, had always been perceptive enough to know, in the moment before anything was said, exactly what kind of room she had walked into. The bags lowered slowly in her hands. "Bill, darling," she started. "Don't," Bill said, just that one word, but in a tone Joy had never once heard her father use in her entire life. Rosalind looked at Joy. Joy looked back at her. "You were always the one I had to worry about," Rosalind's eyes said. "You were right to worry," Joy's eyes said back. Rosalind didn't confess. People like Rosalind don't confess. Confessing requires acknowledging that what you did was wrong, and the particular architecture of her self-belief didn't allow for that, she explained. She contextualized. She cried. She said things like, "You don't understand what I went through, and I gave this family everything, and Martha was my best friend," at which point Bill left the room. She pivoted, tried to reach Joy. "You don't know what it's like to love someone that completely she was my mother." Joy said, not raised, not shaking, just factual. "She was my mother and my brother's mother and my father's wife, and she deserved to grow old. None of the rest of it is relevant to me." The legal process unfolded over the following year. It was not tidy, real things rarely are. There was a criminal investigation opened. Sirius moved slowly. There was a civil proceeding. The nursing board opened a formal review. Kim Webb testified with the clarity of someone who had been carrying something for 15 years and finally got to put it down. The letter, the financial records, the transferred complaint. It was enough for one thing and not quite enough for another, and ultimately enough for a third thing that nobody had expected. And the details of that, the specific legal outcome, are in some ways less important than this. Everyone finally knew. The house on Birchwood Lane, which had been Martha's house, and then Rosalind's stage, was sold in the divorce proceedings. Bill moved into a smaller place near Joy and John. He had a spare room that Christopher stayed in between routes. The walls were plain white and Bill said he didn't care. He'd get round to painting eventually. And Joy showed up one Saturday with paint samples, and they spent 4 hours arguing pleasantly about colors and ended up with something warm. Not lavender. Martha's color was Martha's, but warm.